Have you ever met someone who unexpectedly changed the direction of your life? Not someone you had known for years. Not a person you had carefully planned to meet. Just a stranger. A brief conversation. A moment that seemed completely ordinary at the time. And yet, somehow everything after that moment began to unfold differently. Sometimes it happens during a period of uncertainty. You meet someone by chance. Within a few minutes of conversation, they say something that stays with you for years. Other times, you encounter someone who seems to understand exactly what you are going through, even though you met only moments ago. And occasionally, a person appears in your life at precisely the moment when you are about to change direction. Looking back later, the timing can feel strangely precise, as if that meeting happened exactly when it needed to happen, which raises an intriguing question. Are encounters like these simply random moments of chance? Or do certain meetings appear when two lives quietly reach the same turning point? Throughout our lives, we meet thousands of people. Most encounters pass quietly. A short conversation, a brief introduction, a face we barely remember. But every once in a while, something different happens. A single meeting leaves a lasting impression. A conversation changes the way we see things. An unexpected connection opens a path we never planned to follow. Years later, when we look back, that moment begins to stand out. Not because it seemed extraordinary at the time, but because of everything that followed. One meeting leads to another. One idea leads to a new opportunity. And gradually, the direction of a life begins to shift. Moments like these often create a curious feeling, as if the meeting happened at exactly the right moment. Some people describe these experiences as simple coincidences. Others feel that certain encounters appear when two lives are ready to intersect. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung was fascinated by moments like these. He believed that certain coincidences carry a sense of meaning that goes beyond ordinary chance. Jung called these moments synchronicity, events that seem unrelated on the surface, yet feel connected through meaning. Not because one event directly causes another, but because both appear at a moment when something important is unfolding in a person's life. From this perspective, some encounters may feel meaningful not because they were planned, but because they occur at a moment when two paths naturally cross. And when that happens, a simple meeting can become the beginning of an entirely new direction. Throughout history, people have often felt that certain meetings in life carry a deeper significance. A person appears at exactly the moment when something inside us is beginning to change. A conversation happens just when we are searching for direction, and somehow, that encounter becomes a turning point. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung was deeply interested in experiences like these. Rather than seeing them as simple coincidences, Jung believed they might reveal something deeper about how meaningful events can appear in human lives. He suggested that not every meaningful moment can be explained through simple cause and effect. Some events, he observed, seem to be connected through meaning itself, rather than direct physical causation. Encounters between people often provide some of the clearest examples of this pattern. From Jung's perspective, these meetings were not always the result of careful planning. Instead, they reflected something deeper about how human lives unfold. Our inner psychological changes often shape the situations we move toward. The questions we carry influence the conversations we enter, and the direction of our attention quietly guides the paths we walk, which raises an interesting possibility. When two people are moving through similar moments of change, their lives may naturally begin moving toward the same intersections, not because the meeting was predetermined, but because both paths are already unfolding in similar directions. If we look closely at many life-changing encounters, a curious pattern often appears. These meetings rarely happen during calm and predictable periods of life. Instead, they tend to appear during moments of transition, times when someone is searching for meaning, questioning a decision, or stepping into a new chapter of life. During these moments, awareness becomes sharper. We begin asking deeper questions. We become more sensitive to people, ideas, and conversations that resonate with our situation. And when two people happen to be moving through similar transformations at the same time, their paths become more likely to cross. Not because destiny arranged the meeting, but because both lives were already moving toward the same moment of possibility. And when those paths intersect, a single encounter can quietly alter the direction of everything that follows. Another way to understand meaningful encounters comes from the idea of resonance. In many natural systems, something interesting happens. When two patterns begin moving in similar rhythms, they begin influencing one another. We see this in music. Two instruments tuned to the same frequency can begin vibrating together. We see it in physics as well. When waves move in similar patterns, they gradually synchronize. And something similar may also happen within human experience. Every thought, every emotion, every intention is accompanied by activity inside the brain and nervous system. These internal patterns shape how we speak, how we listen, and how we respond to the people around us. So when two people are moving through similar questions, similar changes, or similar intentions in life, their conversations often begin to flow more naturally. Ideas resonate faster. Understanding appears more easily. From this perspective, certain encounters may feel powerful, not because they were carefully planned, but because the two lives involved are moving through a similar moment of transformation. And when those moments intersect, even a simple meeting can create a connection that feels unexpectedly meaningful. Many life-changing encounters actually begin in very ordinary ways. There is no dramatic introduction, no sense that something important is about to happen. Just two people meeting in a place they both happen to be. Imagine two people attending the same workshop or event. Perhaps both of them feel that something in their lives needs to change. They sit in the same room, surrounded by strangers. During a break, they begin a simple conversation. At first, the discussion is casual, where they came from, what they do for work. But as the conversation continues, something interesting begins to appear. Both of them are asking similar questions about their lives. They begin to realize that the path they were following no longer fits who they are becoming. And both are searching for a new direction. What started as a small conversation slowly becomes a deeper connection. They stay in contact. They exchange ideas. Sometimes they become collaborators. Sometimes they become close friends. And sometimes their lives simply continue moving in parallel as they grow through similar transformations. Years later, that first conversation may appear strangely significant, not because it seemed extraordinary at the time, but because it happened at the exact moment when both lives were beginning to change. And in that quiet moment, two separate paths briefly intersected, creating a connection that neither person could have predicted. Encounters that change the course of our lives do not always arrive as dramatic events. Often they appear quietly, through the presence of a single person at the right moment. Many people who later achieve remarkable things describe meeting someone who helped them see possibilities they had not yet recognized. Sometimes that person appears as a mentor, someone with more experience, someone who recognizes potential before it becomes visible. In the early days of Apple, for example, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak met an experienced entrepreneur named Mike Markkula. Markkula did more than invest in their small company. He helped them understand how to turn their ideas into a real business. He also helped shape the early vision of the company. Without that encounter, Apple might have followed a very different path. A similar moment happened when Mark Zuckerberg met Sean Parker during the early development of Facebook. Parker quickly recognized the potential of the platform and helped shape its early strategy. At the time, these meetings were simply conversations between people. But the timing of those encounters helped change the direction of entire companies and eventually influenced millions of lives. Yet sometimes the moment is even quieter. Imagine someone sitting in a cafe on an ordinary afternoon, reading, working, or simply thinking about the future. At the next table, two strangers are having a conversation. At first, the person listens only casually, but something about the discussion catches their attention. Perhaps they are talking about a project, an idea, an opportunity that sounds strangely familiar. Eventually, the person turns and says, "Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." The strangers smile. They begin talking. Ideas are exchanged. Contact information is shared. And what began as an accidental conversation slowly opens the door to something new. A collaboration, a career opportunity, or a completely unexpected direction in life. Years later, the memory often returns to that simple moment. A quiet afternoon, a cafe, a conversation that almost never happened, and yet somehow, it became the beginning of an entirely new path. Encounters like these happen quietly all the time. Most meetings between people pass without leaving much trace, but occasionally, a single conversation, a single introduction, or a single unexpected meeting becomes the moment when the direction of a life begins to change. Which raises an intriguing question. Why do certain encounters seem to arrive at exactly the moment they matter most? And why do some people appear in our lives precisely when we are ready to meet them? When we look back on our lives, something interesting begins to appear. Most of the people we meet pass quietly through our story. A short conversation, a brief introduction, a face we barely remember. But every once in a while, someone appears whose presence leaves a deeper mark. Not necessarily because they stayed in our lives for many years. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they remain only for a brief moment. A conversation during a journey, a teacher who appears during a difficult year, a stranger who says something that stays with us long after the meeting ends. At the time, the moment may feel ordinary. Just another conversation, just another encounter. But years later, when we look back, something becomes clearer. We begin to notice that the direction of our lives started to shift soon after that meeting. A new idea appeared. A decision became clearer. A path opened that we had never considered before. And slowly, we begin, tracing the moment when everything started. The conversation, the introduction, the encounter that almost never happened, which makes us wonder, why do certain people appear at exactly the moment when we seem to need them most? Perhaps the answer is not that life is carefully arranging every meeting, but that human lives move through seasons of change, moments when we are ready to learn something new, ready to see something differently, ready to become someone slightly different from who we were before. During those moments of transformation, certain encounters can carry extraordinary influence, not because they were planned, but because we were ready to hear what those people had to say. Perhaps the people who change our lives do not appear by accident, and they do not appear because the universe has written a script for every meeting. Perhaps they appear because at that moment, two lives happen to be moving through the same chapter of change, and when those paths intersect, a single encounter can quietly reshape the story that follows. So, the next time you meet someone who unexpectedly leaves a mark on your life, pause for a moment, not because the meeting must carry some mysterious meaning, but because sometimes the smallest encounters quietly shape the direction of our stories. A short conversation, a brief introduction, a moment shared between two people who had never met before. And yet, that moment may become the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. Perhaps life is not carefully arranging every encounter we experience, but human lives are constantly moving, changing, and intersecting with one another. And occasionally, two paths cross at exactly the moment when both people are ready to change. Looking back later, those meetings can feel almost impossible to ignore. Because from that point forward, something about our direction begins to shift. A new idea, a new opportunity, a new understanding of who we are becoming. And sometimes, when we follow the thread of our lives far enough, we realize the story may have started with a very simple encounter. A meeting that once seemed ordinary, but quietly changed everything that followed. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Healing Galaxy so our energy field can continue to grow and expand. Thank you for being here and have a peaceful day.